ridicule, that in fact one of
Marianne, I've got to interrupt because there are several outlets reporting that he has gotten 14 years in prison, 168 to 69 months. So you do the math, that's 14 years in prison, according to several news outlets, including our partners over at the Chicago Sun-Times. The War Room getting ready to update this as well. Another outlet in downstate Illinois is reporting this. The Chicago Conservative Initiative, Chicago News Cooperative, I apologize, is reporting that this is 60 months and 36 months, all to run concurrent. So if you do the math there, it's well over a decade.
What is it again? 14 years?
14 years would be very, I mean, and if he serves that 85%, that would mean he's serving, what, nearly 11 and a half some years in prison. His birthday is this Saturday. He turns 55. He will not be out of prison until after 65 years old. His 15-year-old at that point will be 25 years old. His 8-year-old will be 18. His wife has to sell their home. When he says his life is ruined, he is exactly right.
Well, it is, and that's honestly, I'm a little bit surprised because the judge made the comment that he accepted his apology and that it might affect it. So that means the judge was maybe thinking 15 and gave him the half off there, maybe that 1 year
15,
off?
maybe 16.
Maybe 16.
You know, the aggravation of him going through the course of the first trial, the aggravation of going through the second trial, his actions during the first trial and the second trial, the flippancy that he had, signing autographs as he was coming in and out of court. You know, all of those, I'm sure there are things that the court took into consideration. If not overtly, then you know the judge has to know about those things and know exactly how he treated people on the outside.
After 2 trials, the Washington Post also reporting, you see at the bottom of your screen, former Governor Rod Blagojevich sentenced to 14 years in prison. Judge James Zagel has just wrapped up his comments in the sentencing. He may still be addressing the courtroom, but reporters are now tweeting out this information, and it falls within, Marianne, the guidelines that the government wanted. They were asking for 12 to 15, is that right?
No, they were asking 15
they
to 20.
Were asking 15,
so just
15
below
to 20.
what they asked. So that it's significant, though, and even his own attorney said that if you followed what the government asked, he would be the most severely punished public figure in the history of the United States. I believe that's what his own defense team said. So if that does, I don't know, I don't have those facts, but that's what Carolyn Gerlin apparently said in court when she was speaking in his defense in the sentence.
Can I give you the first reaction already received?
Please.
From GOP Republican State Senator Kirk Dillard, who in fact would like to be governor, I'm sure one day, did run in the last election. He says, thankfully, this sentence marks the end of a long, sorry story in Illinois' history. It should serve as a reminder that we have been diligent to fight corruption. And as a lawyer and the spokesperson for the Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe in the American judicial system and support Judge Zagel's sentence. As far as those who believe Blagojevich deserved a more lenient penalty, I'll say this. My mother always told me, you reap what you sow, and I believe this sentence is a good reflection of that.
Let me give you a few more details. Marianne, I'm sorry to interrupt you because we're getting more details from the courtroom. The surrender date is expected to be the middle of February, February 16th of next year, just a few months away. So it's likely that the former governor will be allowed to spend some time at home. That's how the process would work, right, Marianne? That he would be allowed to go home today, and then according to several outlets, he will surrender on February 16th of 2012.
Right. They usually give about 60 to 90 days, so that February date is not unusual at all. Gives him time, obviously, to prepare and to prepare his family for what's ahead.
And then it's my understanding that he will request a specific prison, but is up to the Bureau of Prisons to determine where he goes. And as you mentioned, it's more likely at this point he will go to a maximum security rather than a minimum security prison, which were often referred to as camp feds.
That's right. That's right. There is one, I understand, in Pekin, Illinois. That isn't too far, about 3 hours away. That doesn't mean he's going to be sent there, but perhaps again, Terre Haute. But I don't think that he does qualify now for Oxford, that we have seen several politicians over the last many years head that way.
This is an interesting, I mean, obviously, Another one goes down in the state of Illinois, 2 successive governors. Where do we stand as it relates to our corruption convictions here? We have to be up there toward the top, especially in recent history. This is a sad day, really, for the state of Illinois.
A very bad day.
Well, it used to be New Jersey, but now, you've got Illinois that has become kind of the public laughingstock of, you send your governor, you get elected governor, hey, you got a jail sentence at the end of your term. It's very unfortunate. It's very sad. It's a sad commentary on Illinois politics. But, you have to really think about, you've had, all this stuff going on in Springfield. You drop a Democrat in there where, Republicans have been for years and years and years in the executive office, and all of a sudden things begin to come to the surface. Bill Cellini, who they have been looking at for years, investigating, all of a sudden he has to deal with a Democrat, and perhaps he's doing things in different ways now because you're dealing with someone
exposing himself a little more, maybe.
Precisely. And, you've got
Can I mention it?
Go ahead, Mary.
I wanted to mention as well, of those former governors, so George Ryan, we do know he did receive a sentence of 6.5 years, Otto Kerner 3 years, and Dan Walker 7 years. So this being twice what those former governors had received. Indeed, this really does break through. And will it make a difference, is what many wonder. Will this deter others from committing similar crimes?
Perhaps, because 14 years is a whole lot different than 6.5.
Yeah, well, these were multiple sentences. If you read some of the information coming in from Judge Zagel's courtroom, there was a 60-month and a 36-month sentence, but they'll be served concurrently, which isn't uncommon. They'll bookend those together.
There's also a $20,000 fine so far that we're mentioning.
Yes, absolutely.
The wardroom is just reporting a $20,000 fine as well.
And the judge will assess fines, court costs, and then he'll have to do, obviously, when he gets done with the time, he'll have to do federal parole, and he'll be placed on parole, and then the parole will monitor what he does. That's assuming that he outlives his sentence.
You got to wonder what's going to happen with the family, because as far as we know, Patty Blagojevich is not working. They haven't been able to sell their home in Ravenswood Manor, which they listed for over $1 million, and then dropped the price on that. It's not the best time for real estate. You got to wonder, what are you going to do? You got to completely change your life. She's obviously either going to have to work or be supported by her family. There was an article in the paper today in the Sun-Times talking about Richard Mell, who is elderly now. He's still working, but is he now going to be supporting and helping to support his daughter and his stepdaughter? So life will change. Not only will the father not be there, their life will change completely in having to support themselves.
Phil, we're going to come back to the studio as you wait to hear from both sides in this case, and I want to come back to Tom because we're hearing some sympathetic jurors. You just heard her say she was somewhat surprised at the 14 years. As a defense attorney, is it not your job to convince the entire court, including the judge, to show sympathy, because you're hearing this from jurors and you didn't get much sympathy from Judge Zagel today? Well,
although judges have great discretion in their sentencing, the federal sentencing guidelines are really the yardstick with which you measure. And it's kind of federal mathematical algebra to figure out exactly what the federal sentencing guidelines are. And when we end up getting to that point of sentencing in a federal court, the prosecutor and myself will end up, disputing how that math is come to bear. In other words, what is the range of sentence and how did you get there? Going back to geometry, going back to algebra, show me the proof of how you got from A to B. And that's where we dispute things as to the length of sentence. In this particular case, although the federal sentencing guidelines, the judge made clear what the federal sentencing guidelines said, he has the authority under the law to deviate from those, and that's what he did. Did
the Blagojevich team make a fundamental error in their filings by not coming forward within the filings, the arguments that they made, and really falling on the sword a little bit more? Was that an error?
Well, they didn't fall on the sword soon enough, as Judge Zagel said. I mean, instead of going forward at the beginning of this and having him be more of a mea culpa status and toning it down. Remember, his first attorney withdrew because he would not stop doing what he was doing, going out, talking to the press. He couldn't control the message that was going out to the public and to the potential jurors because Blagojevich insisted on being the politician that he was. Because of that, you have a situation where it wasn't until the point where they began to argue the sentencing and mitigation yesterday that there was the crimes were committed, the admission that crimes were committed, which was the admission of guilt that everyone had been looking for. And it really wasn't until Blagojevich himself ended up saying, I accept the jury's verdict. That was the first time in all of these years that you've heard him say, from the impeachment to the indictment to the first trial to the second trial and now up into sentencing, it's the first time you have ever heard him say, I did something wrong.
Richard Kling said he thought he gave him 2 points in that system, which amounted to 2 years for his
acceptance
apology.
of responsibility equals 2 points, so it equals 2 years in this situation.
That's what he gave. So he could have had 16 in this case. What is next?
What's next is they'll file their post-trial motions, as you know, Professor Kling said. They're going to ask to delineate some federal institution for him to go to, but they probably will file a motion to reconsider the sentence and ask him, you know, to preserve that piece of litigation for appeal. Then they have to file the appeal, and they're going to go through the process.
And he'll try to stay out on bond during the appeal. Likely.
He'll ask for an appellate bond. The Seventh Circuit rarely grants appellate bonds, and in this case, because of the evidence that was presented, I really don't think that an appellate bond is going to be granted by the Seventh Circuit.
And he's expected to surrender February 16th of next year. Judy Bartopinka is also sitting here with us reacting. Before we talk more to you, we want to go back to the Dirksen Federal Building.
I want to talk a little bit more to Tom Glasgow, a little bit more about the function, what happens next for him as far as being someone who will have to surrender himself. How will he turn himself in? Will his lawyer escort him somewhere? Will he be put in handcuffs anywhere? What can we anticipate come February 16th?
Well, if you remember back to George Ryan got into the van with Laura, his wife. They drove to the federal penitentiary, and at that point they presented the order and he was taken into custody. It's a very, very anticlimactic way to end a criminal case, and it's also very humiliating for the person who has to then go turn themselves in. They have to have their family drive them there. They have to then say goodbye to their family while they're standing there. And then they're taken away not to be seen for several months after that while they go through the process of indoctrination and being put into the federal penitentiary system and becoming that number, as Professor Kling said. I do have to take issue with regard to, most respectfully,
oh, that's fine. I think you're
with
great.
the deterrent value. And deterrent is like proving the negative. Deterrent is the whole basis of the criminal justice system. We send a message to people by giving them the sentences that we give them in order to deter other people. It's not those people that you see back in the system. That's the person who's sitting behind the desk thinking to himself, he got 14 years. I'm not going to take this step. You hear about the people that it doesn't affect. So the deterrent value does have an effect, and I know that from being both a prosecutor and speaking with defendants in the course of interrogation rooms, but also as a private counsel and speaking to them in my office, with them sitting there and telling me, no, I didn't commit this crime because I knew I would get X, Y, or Z as a sentence. You will always have that 1% of society that will commit crimes regardless. But there is a significant deterrent value to this particular sentence, and sending a message throughout the United States that we as a country really need to take our government more seriously, as you very, very adeptly put.
Rod Blagojevich will leave the Dirksen Federal Building today. As Tom was discussing, will report and surrender February 16th. So we're waiting for him to leave the downtown building. Our cameras are there, and we will try to show that to you live. If you see a camera shot of a garage, that's where he's expected to pull out, and we'll continue to follow that. In the meantime, Marianne Ahern and Phil Rogers have been talking to jurors, and I believe Marianne has another juror react.